Thanks very much for coming, everybody. Sorry to keep you waiting, and we're under a little bit of time pressure as well. So I think we'll commence with a short word from Minister McEntee, followed by the Taoiseach. Minister McEntee has a TV engagement as well, so she'll probably have to depart fairly shortly. Due to the time restrictions as well, we'll only have a limited time for questions as well from the media. Thank you.
Thanks, Nick. Well, good afternoon, everyone. You're all very welcome. Today is, of course, an important day in terms of the overall negotiations, particularly taking into account the fact that it's taken almost 2 years to get to where we are today. Earlier this week, myself and the Taoiseach met with our European and Foreign Affairs ministerial colleagues. We met to endorse the work of Michel Barnier and the task force, to endorse the draft withdrawal agreement which was agreed last week, and obviously taking into account with a view that the overall political declaration would be agreed this week as well. If I could just say, maybe on a personal note, having spent the past year and a half around the table with 28 member states discussing and working on issues that are significant and that will impact on all of us, I regret the fact that the UK will no longer be around that table, but in saying that, the best outcome for us is that an agreement is reached, that the UK leave the EU in an orderly fashion next March, and obviously that is our focus now and that is our priority moving into the months ahead. Taoiseach.
Okay, well, thanks very much everyone for coming. Just to confirm, as you'll have heard already, that the 28 countries represented here today, the 27 member states that are staying in the European Union plus the United Kingdom, have endorsed the withdrawal agreement, including the protocols on Ireland, Cyprus and Gibraltar, and also the text of the document on the joint political declaration on the future relationship. I've always thought that the best outcome for Ireland and for Europe, and indeed the United Kingdom, would be for the UK to stay in the European Union, the customs union and the single market, but we respect the decision of the British people and the UK Parliament not to do that. And what we have agreed today is the next best outcome. It protects the peace, affirms the rights and freedoms of European, Irish and British citizens, ensures that there will be no hard border, and also insulates our economy from major disruptions in trade, thus protecting jobs and people's standard of living. The withdrawal agreement provides for an orderly exit of the UK from the European Union, protects citizens' rights and freedoms of particular importance to us as a common travel area. That's written into the Irish Protocol, becomes legally binding as part of an international treaty, and means that British and Irish people will be able to continue to travel freely between the two islands, live, work in each other's countries, access healthcare, housing, education, welfare, pensions, just as we do now and have done for decades. Something that will not be available to other European citizens, unfortunately, but a special arrangement between our two countries that will continue after the UK leaves. There's the financial settlement as well, of course, which is important, an ongoing commitment to funding for peace and Interreg, which is very important for Northern Ireland, but also for the border counties in Ireland. And the single electricity market is protected as well, and that's very important in terms of power supplies in Northern Ireland. There will be a transition period that'll run for 2 years with the possibility of an extension, and during that transition period nothing will change, and will give us the time that we need to negotiate a future relationship with the UK. If for some reason that doesn't work out and we're not able to successfully negotiate a future relationship, then and only then would the backstop kick in. And that'll ensure that there's no hard border between North and South. And it'll also ensure that we've quota-free and tariff-free trade between Britain and Ireland, which is very important for our industry, our exporters, and for jobs in the economy. And also there'll be a level playing field attached to that as well, to ensure that any competition is fair. So what we need to do now is to get on with it, get on with the ratification of this agreement by the House of Commons and also by the European Parliament. And when that's done, from March, April onwards, to get busy negotiating the future relationship treaty. Probably 2 treaties, one dealing with the economic partnership that will exist between the UK and the EU after the transition period ends, and a second one to deal with security. So look forward to proceeding with ratification and getting on to the future relationship.
Thank you, Taoiseach. First question to Colin Mongal from RTE.
Taoiseach, notwithstanding the fact that it's taken 2 years, this is arguably the easy bit. All the leaders arriving here today saying that they're in agreement, but Prime Minister May is facing into disunity in the UK Parliament. What's Plan B?
Well, there isn't a plan B. The truth is what we have here is the best deal that's available, both for the United Kingdom and for the European Union. We have a backstop in place, but we all agree that that's an insurance policy that has to be there, but would only need to be invoked under certain circumstances, and even if it is, may only need to be invoked in part and for a temporary period as a bridge to a future relationship. And we all agree that the United Kingdom, after it leaves, will be more than a third country, given the fact that it has had such a close relationship with the European Union, that it is a member and will be the only former member after it leaves, given its economic importance, given the contributions made to European security. We're determined to make sure that the United Kingdom isn't just another third country, that we have a special relationship between the EU and the UK afterwards. In terms of alternative options and Plan B and all of that type of thing, let's not forget what we have here. We have an agreement that took between 18 months and 2 years to negotiate. It's in several parts, is over 500 pages long, and as of today has the support of 28 governments, 27 member states that are staying, and the United Kingdom government as well. And I hear a lot of people talking about better deals or alternative deals, and anyone can have a better deal or an alternative deal in their own minds. But an agreement 500 pages long that 28 member states can sign up to, nobody has that. So what's on the table is the only deal that's on the table.
Pat Leahy, Irish Times.
Taoiseach, the deal only has value, though, if it can be ratified by Mrs May. And one of the difficulties, the obvious difficulties that she has, is with the backstop and particularly the exit mechanism. Are you ruling out any question of looking again at that, specifically with regard to the exit mechanism, if Mrs May cannot ratify this treaty?
Well, I am. It's not just me. It's the entire European Union today was very much of the view that there couldn't be a renegotiation. It wasn't easy to get to this point. A 500-page treaty that's been backed by 28 member state governments. And once you start to open up one issue, you can potentially open up other issues as well. We saw in the last couple of days the extent to which Gibraltar could have become an issue. We know that some countries are reluctant to accept the fact that there will be a single customs territory between the EU and the UK, because they feel that gives the UK preferential access to the European markets were the backstop to be invoked. And then there's, of course, issues relating to Ireland. And you see that is the core difficulty with people who are arguing that there is a better deal on offer or a better deal can be negotiated. They don't agree among themselves what that better deal could be. They probably wouldn't have a majority in Parliament for an alternative deal either, and they certainly wouldn't have 28 member states signed up to it. So really what's being put in front of the European Parliament and the House of Commons is a deal. Any other deal really only exists in people's imaginations.
Andrew Byrne, Sunday Times.
Thank you, Taoiseach. Was there any discussion among the other leaders of what to do in the event that the vote fails in the House of Commons? And further to that, do you think that do you have a particular message for those advocating this better option, this fantasy Brexit? Is there anything else that could be done to improve what's on the table?
Yeah, well, we made a kind of conscious decision, if you like, as 27 member states today, not to discuss what may happen if the House of Commons were to reject this deal, precisely for that reason, because we took 18 months getting to this point. We finally have an agreement that everyone can sign up to, 28 governments, including the UK government. Nobody got everything they wanted. There had to be compromises on all sides. And rather than talking about any sort of alternative deal, what we want to get onto is the future relationship. And once we get to the future relationship, there are all sorts of possibilities there. But this is a document, an agreement, took 18 months to negotiate. Even now, it's going to take time to be translated into 20-something different languages. That's one of the reasons why the European Parliament won't be able to ratify it until January or February. Like, the idea that something else can be negotiated, even leaving aside the time frame, it just doesn't add up. In terms of alternatives, I think, as the Prime Minister said, there are almost as many alternatives as there are politicians or MPs. I think any one of us could, in our own minds, dream up a perfect deal that would be better for us from the perspective we're coming from. But the whole point about any of these alternatives that are being mooted, are being suggested, is they would not command the support of 28 member states. And a deal that doesn't command the support of 28 member states doesn't even go to Parliament. And even those who are advocating that there could be an alternative, do they have a majority for their personal alternative in the Parliament either? So we have an agreement now, 18 months negotiating it, 500 pages, 28 member states have agreed to it. I don't see anyone coming up with an alternative deal that has that level of weight or level of support behind it. These are just ideas that people have, and we've kind of been there before,
Elaine Loughlin, Irish Examiner.
Taoiseach, obviously we all want this deal ratified by the House of Commons, but Taoiseach Simon Coveney has already said that there are some contingency plans that the Irish Government is working on that he has not disclosed. If the House of Commons does not pass it, will you be publishing these contingency plans, or do you plan on publishing them at any time? And separately, I suppose, would you be encouraging and asking Boris Johnson, DUP and other Brexiteers to desist now in what is dangerous behaviour and dangerous comments around this deal?
Well, the contingency plans that we have are based around two scenarios. One is what we've been calling for quite some time, the central case scenario, which is more or less the agreement that we've come to, and we've been planning for that for a very long time. Then there's also a secondary set of planning, which is for a no-deal scenario, and we have to continue that planning. Even though we're much closer to a deal being agreed today than we were a couple of weeks ago, we still have to continue planning for the possibility of a no-deal. So that's the kind of contingency planning that we're doing, and a lot of that's published already. It's not, everyone knows what that involves in terms of custom officers and infrastructure and ports and airports and so on. In relation to, whether it's the DUP or whether it's Boris Johnson or anyone who's opposing this, certainly when it comes to the DUP, I understand their position. I've met them and I've spoken to them about it, and I know what they're saying. But I would posit a counter view, and I would say that this agreement that we have now today is very much in line with the principles of the Good Friday Agreement. And if you think about the principles of the Good Friday Agreement, the first is that we should only pursue political objectives by peaceful means in Britain and Ireland. The second is that we all accept that Northern Ireland is part of the United Kingdom until such a time as the people of Northern Ireland vote otherwise. And thirdly, we all accept that because of Northern Ireland's unique history and unique geography, that it has special arrangements that on occasion make it a little bit different from the rest of the UK. And we have that in relation to agriculture, energy. They've sought it in relation to corporation tax. We have it on human rights issues and issues of personal liberty like marriage equality and the woman's rights to choose, for example. So I don't think that having a special arrangement relating to market regulations on industrial goods is fundamentally different from the special arrangements that exist already. It's very much in line with the kind of arrangements that exist already.
John Downing, Irish Independent.
In the Dáil last week, you suggested that in the case of a no-deal scenario, there would have to be some kind of negotiation, that a no-deal is crash out is completely unthinkable. Just ask you to speak to that, please. And also, this is of huge concern to Irish farmers. Where do you see Irish agriculture and Irish agribusiness being fixed after this?
Yeah, to be very honest and very frank on the first question, we discussed this as 27 this morning, and we've all agreed, not to speculate on that sort of scenario, because we don't want to give the impression to anyone that somehow there's a better deal available here. There are people on both sides of the spectrum in the UK, people who are strong and passionate Remainers who believe that a better deal can be negotiated. There are people who are strong, passionate, hardline Brexiteers who believe that a better deal can be negotiated. We've been the ones doing the negotiations. We spent 18 months getting to this point, and we don't want to create the false impression that somehow there's a better deal for the UK that can be negotiated. It can't. Any deal is going to look something like this. In terms of the impact on agriculture and farming, I think this agreement puts us in good stead. It means that for 2 years or more, there'll be no change in the rules of trade, east, west, north, south, and that's what our farmers want. And if the backstop does kick in, there will still be tariff-free, quota-free trade between Britain and Ireland. And Britain is the biggest market for agriculture, particularly for beef, particularly for timber and some other areas. And that would be retained in the backstop scenario. So anything to be negotiated in the future relationship would therefore be better than that. There are, of course, other issues that affect agriculture which will come to the fore. We will have to come to an agreement on fisheries over the next couple of years, and that will obviously be of major interest and major concern to coastal communities. And there's the MFF, and I know a lot of farmers will want to see us getting a good outcome from that as well.
Just have time for one final question. Sean, I know you've travelled, so.
Thank you. Taoiseach, yourself and the other leaders there today, what do you rate the chances of Theresa May actually being able to get this deal done in Parliament, and is there anything that can be done from your side or from the European side to help that to happen?
I think as the date approaches, as decision day approaches, the chances of Prime Minister May winning the vote in Parliament actually increases, because as time goes on, as we get closer to the vote, it's going to become more and more obvious that the alternative to this deal is a no-deal scenario, and that is essentially the difficult decision that MPs are going to have to make. It'll become more and more obvious that those who are opposed to this deal don't agree among themselves as to what an alternative deal might look like, and therefore those alternatives would not have majority support in Parliament, and certainly would not have the support of the 28 member states who have endorsed this deal. So I think it'll become increasingly obvious as we get closer to that vote in the House of Commons that the alternative is a no-deal cliff-edge Brexit, which of course is something that we all want to avoid, and very few people, even in the UK, would see as a good outcome. In terms of what the EU and the UK can do, I think that's obviously something that we will continue to be in touch with the UK government about over the next couple of weeks. Ultimately, this is an internal decision for members of the House of Commons to make, and as a government of another country, I think we need to be careful about any interventions and be sensitive around them. I know when it's come to political issues in Ireland, when it's come to referendums in the past, presidents and prime ministers from other countries flying in to give us advice hasn't necessarily achieved what was intended. It's backfired. So we need to be careful and sensitive about the fact and respect that this is a decision for the UK Parliament to make, and they have to make it in the best interests of the people in the United Kingdom. I think what we can do, though, is provide information and provide clarifications. And the first of those is that this is an agreement of 28 member states. We do not believe that it's possible to negotiate a better deal for the EU and the UK, and we're the ones who've been negotiating this for 18 months. And secondly, what we can do is give the reassurance to say that Prime Minister May is correct in what she has said to date about the backstop. We want to negotiate a future relationship that is so close between the EU and the UK that means that the backstop never has to be invoked. And if it does have to be invoked in part or in full, it's our intention that it would only be done on a temporary basis until such a time as we can negotiate a future relationship to supersede it.
Okay, thank you very much, everyone. That's all we have time for today.
Thank you.